one of those three key challenge areas is around supporting the efforts of anybody to support efforts to mitigate the impacts of climate change, and also to look at disaster risk reduction, disaster management. So that's our resilience and climate change challenge. So that's the lens that we look at the work that we do as an organization through. So if you skip on to the next slide, Bapon, I'll talk a little bit about the framework around that. So Bapon in his introduction mentioned the FAIR principles of data accessibility. In 2011, New Zealand government issued its declaration on open and transparent government, and a big part of that open government was around making key government data openly available for release. So the principles that all publicly funded data, if it's non-personal and unclassified and of high potential for reuse, should be released for open use. And we've applied a number of principles around that. So we have the New Zealand Data and Information Management principles that I'll talk about shortly. We also have a government open licensing framework that is tied in with the Creative Commons licensing, and also we aim to publish that key data through our government data catalogue, which is data.gov.nz. So those principles for data and information management are at the top. Data should be open by default if it's non-personal and non-sensitive. If it is personal sensitive, it should be protected. The data should be readily available. It should be trusted and authoritative and well managed. It should be reasonably priced, which generally means it should be freely available from government unless there are costs around providing it, as they're generally very low if they are. And a key thing is that the data should be reusable, so it should be licensed, non-proprietary and machine readable. And I say we use the data.gov platform as a means for doing that. When we looked at key data for resilience and climate change a couple of years ago, we looked through the user lenses of the 4 R's of resilience, so risk reduction, readiness, response and rebuild. And we catalogued, looking at a whole bunch of different user cases, at over 100 different key data sets that could be of high value. We didn't feel we were in a position to look at improving all 100, but we picked the top 12, and these are the top 12. So they're themed around people and property, around transport, around topographic data, and around the water environment. And some of those are related to Earth observation, so aerial photography and elevation from LiDAR. So we set out to drive data improvements for key data around that. If you do the next click. And it's not just an effort from Land Information in New Zealand. We're working with these other key government agencies, statistics, transport, rail operators, fire and emergency New Zealand, and NIWA, who are our Crown Research Establishment for Water and Atmosphere. So we're all working collaboratively to drive those improvements. And this is what the improvement process looks like. So you'll see along the top the listing of the key data, and down the side you'll look at the attributes that we're working towards. So the idea is to get the red boxes through to green, and the criteria we're assessing are: does the data have national coverage? Is it well attributed? Is it of a relevant level of accuracy? Things like, is it Creatively Commons licensed? It is available for download in multiple formats or IPAs? Is the metadata in place? So through all of these improvements, we're trying to make that data more useful and usable by people working in that space. And you'll see this is just a snapshot. The areas in the black bounded boxes were areas we made improvements over the last 12 months, and we'll continue to work on driving those improvements until we've got a nice green sheet there to work on. Next slide, please. So where is the data? And that's often a common problem. And you'll see listed here a whole bunch of different web resources that you're more than happy to go back to when you look at the recording of this. But actually finding where the data is a key problem for many users. So next slide, please. So within New Zealand, users not knowing which natural hazard data sets are fit for purpose and where to locate them is resulting in poor outcomes for our disaster risk reduction. So we're working with the team at data.gov, that catalogue, to make that easier for people. And the way we've done that, if we skip on to the next slide, is on that data catalog to create different thematic groupings of natural hazard data, where you'll find catalog listings for key data that sits under those categories. But it does rely on agencies and government agencies and local government agencies publishing that data available. So it's a two-pronged approach. One is to find or create a space that users know to go to find that data, but the other side of the coin is getting organizations to publish that data in the first place. And that's the challenge we're working on at the moment. Next slide. And I guess it's a common problem, and this is really just to tie in what we're doing at a national level with the same challenge that's been recognised internationally, and particularly through the work of the UNGGIM and the establishment of this strategic framework on geospatial information and services for disasters. So you'll see there the key goal for that framework is that quality geospatial information and services are available and accessible in a timely and coordinated way to support decision makers across all phases of the disaster risk management cycle. So there's a long way to go to make that happen. We're making progress in New Zealand. We do have some things in place around the policy settings, which are good. But then I think like a lot of other countries, we are still challenged with improving the availability and accessibility and quality of data. But being able to align the work we're doing at a national level with international frameworks helps to make this work a lot easier for us. And I'm hoping that through forums like Geo that we can work together on this. Final slide, I think. Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, so I think what we found is success is not the work of one, but of the work of many, and that's certainly true in the context of our national efforts. But I think Geo has an awful lot to offer us all in working together on these challenges. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rob, for your presentation. We like to move forward, but also there are actually a couple of questions for our panelists in the chat box. Feel free to look at that and answer if you want to, or we can actually come back after the session again to the question and answer to respond some of those question that has been raised by the audience. I'd like to invite now to the Unikrishnan Nair from the Commonwealth Secretariat to discuss about the built climate resilience and enhanced decision-making through the use of satellite remote sensing technology. Uni, over to you. I don't see. Uni, you are probably mute. I think no one able to hear you, Uni. So probably we can move on and we can come back to you one more time. I maybe like to request Dr. Heron Sam to discuss about the assessing and analyzing data at scale using the cloud.
Yes, Bapan. Do you want to go to the beginning of the slides?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Heron.
Yeah. Thank you, Baban. Kia ora, everyone. I'm coming to you from Auckland, and nice to meet everyone virtually. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. From point of view of the next few minutes, I will actually talk about a slightly different angle to what the other presenters have talked about, the importance of different data points. But from a point of view of AWS, I think from public cloud perspective, what I will spend time on is really talking about really like storing and accessing and analyzing data at scale, and which is a big problem that we all have. One of the things which we see increasingly across all organizations, with be it government or the private sector, is the fact that like the data sources themselves are massively increasing, exponentially increasing in terms of volume as well. There are multiple sources of data that is coming from so many diverse areas, which it poses a problem. There's a good thing about it, the fact that, okay, we are adding petabytes of data every day. However, the challenge is, look, how do we make use of data? How do we analyze that data in a useful manner that other organizations can end of the day? used. So Bapan, if you go to the next slide. And this is interesting book by DJ Patel and Hilary Mason. If you get your hands on, pretty simple, easy read. But something which comes out strikingly in there for me is the fact that, look, we employ a lot of data scientists in our organizations, and these are expensive resources for a lot of us. There's not many of them to go around. A lot of them are on this call today, hopefully, right? But the thing is, we are expecting these expensive resources to literally spend time cleaning the data that they get before they start even getting to using that data. This is a significant problem right across the industry, right? And part of that is because of the diverse source of data and the way we store data and the way we collect data, etc. So this is a problem that has been called out by DJ Patel and Hilary Mason in the book called Data Driven. What they call this is really we are asking these expensive resources who could actually spend more time in doing real work in doing something called the undifferentiated heavy lifting when it comes to data. So let's look at what this is in the next slide. Yeah, and quite often what we see with organizations, be it government and again in the private sector, is the fact that when we use the traditional approach of collecting data, we actually try to use our data towards computing resources, which is a bit of a challenge because we all have siloed sets of data at different organizations, and we try to then move that data into the computing resources. When we flip that upside down, actually, and we look at the data flow in reverse, is really in the cloud. One of the advantages you have is really we actually move the computing resources to data so that we can use multiple tools to analyze that data rather than actually having to worry about taking that data out and into the place where we want to do the computing and the analytics, which takes time, which also increases cost because we have to unarchive data, put them into new formats, etc. Whereas we flip that upside down and we actually take computing resources to the data rather than worrying about actually taking data to the computing resources. Bapan, next slide. And some of the advantages we have seen in that flip on the head of the model that we actually use is that actually by bringing data into a more central, global, accessible location is that we now make that data accessible to a much more broader community of users across the board, right? And why is this mattering to us? Why does this matter to us in AWS? Is because this matters to our customers and to organizations, whether it's like again government or the private sector, right? Because it matters to them that there are government institutions that are expected to share the data with third parties, right? Because people can make use of that data. So it matters to them to have that data open, to have that data democratized to be used by other parties as well. So what we are able to do that by having the data in the cloud at scale is that you open up that data to a large number of users. Then the other advantage is really when you have data in the cloud, you also have the ability to make use of newer tools and services that come in day out. So your data is not old in that sense because you now can use newer tools that are on the set of data that you already have in there. That increases the pace of research as we have seen. And also the cost is reduced in a massive manner. These are two really key aspects, and I want to talk through two case studies in the next couple of slides on those areas. So this was done by a gentleman called Drew Bollinger at Development Seed. So what he did was he actually took the Landsat data and put it on the AWS cloud. On the left, what you see is the data taken on the traditional methods and used for analysis. And what he realized was like roughly the time taken to analyze a seam of data was about a couple of minutes per seam, right? Because the data was starboard, it was available in traditional methods. And then once you put that on the cloud, data was unarchived, right? And there was tiling within the data that was done to make it much more easier to access. And the time taken for the request to be fulfilled was really, it came down to about a couple of seconds. So from a couple of minutes down to a couple of seconds. Now, in the whole scheme of things, when you had about 100,000 requests put on the data, that really worked out to about nearly 200 days on a very simple calculation. What it really means, it's at speed to the way you actually do things, the way you access data and analyze the data. And that's the biggest benefit Drew actually saw when he used the sample set of data. So on the left is when you use it traditionally, it takes much longer time. You massively reduce that time taken to really access and analyze the data when you do that on the public cloud. Yeah, next slide, please. And one of the very important things from United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is actually how we manage water, right? So Blue Dot Observatory uses satellite data on the cloud to really monitor water bodies around the world. And to see progressively over a period, like how these water bodies either increase, decrease, quite often the latter. But one of the challenges they had seen initially was like the simple cost of actually processing that set of data. 1 month's data was costing them massively. One of the advantages of putting that on the cloud was that they were able to reduce that cost in a quite a significant manner. For example, for about 7,000 bodies of water, like in the system, it cost them about €6 for 1 full month of data to be processed, right? So what it helped is organizations really do things at a much more shoestring budget, literally increasing the speed as well as reducing the cost, which really then drives a lot more innovation around the data and the way you want to use it, making it much more open. What it also meant was data is no longer reserved for organizations or entities that have a lot of funds, right? Which was a blocker for a lot of us to use that data because you could only use data. Either you could actually store petabytes of data yourself, which meant a lot of cost, or you had the tools and the capability to really process data in a bigger scale, which meant you had to invest a lot on that technology infrastructure piece. But by having the cloud accessibility, you could literally start from scratch at very low budgets and also really do things at much faster scale as well. So it really democratized the availability of data for a lot of organizations when they want to even start from a very small budget, very small scale, and then scale up as we go. To the last slide, Bafan. And furthermore, if there's more interest in this particular area, I would recommend you to go and check out Amazon.com Earth, which includes an open repository of data as well, from multiple sources on different areas, from climate model to aerial imagery, satellite imagery, etc. That's available to the public or any entity that wants to use that data. These come from different entities like some components of data, NASA, as well as other organizations. So this is available if you're keen on actually using that. And there are, for research organizations, grants linked to that as well, if you're interested. So that's part of what's provided in there. That's really all from me. Thank you, Bapan.
Thank you so much, Haran, for your nice presentation, the data and the cloud systems. Now, as obviously we all actually working on disaster and climate change or many other fields, Reka Kabanda will be lead us actually how the future look like using a data and digital technology and where actually the world will be stand for a foreseeable future and data to utilize. Over to you, Reka.
Awesome. Thank you, Bepon. I'm really excited to be part of the, this discussion panel. Amazing, conversation from Rob, Dr. Lee, Bepon, yourself, and Haran around the importance of data and what we should be, kind of doing. It's great to see the FAIR principles coming in and how we are looking at really setting up the standards. So, yeah, it's great to see the progress that's happening in this space. Can we go to the next slide, please? I really want to touch upon, and I think probably just want you guys to kind of just reflect for 1 minute how transformations have really happened within the decade. How we've moved from iPods to smartphones, from torrents to live streaming via Netflix, dial-up internet access. I am of the age where we had dial-up internet access, and we're kind of moving into that 5G space. We have, there have been so much of transformations that have happened, which is huge. And as Haran pointed out, there's a lot towards in the cloud storage. And I do remember floppy disk time and also carrying the pen drive, kind of to get the work done. But yes, we have, but we've been through a lot of transformation in the last just 10 years. Next slide, please. I wanted to kind of talk about the phases of industrialization. It's good to always connect the dots, and to connect the dots, you have to look back into the past and see how far we have come to actually predict how far we will go in the future. So if you see, the industry on the industry continuum, how things have changed. We moved from industry 1.0 to 2.0 in a matter of span of 120 years, when we moved from machinery to having electricity, which kind of changed our lives completely. And then we moved from electricity to computers, which was a big massive change, but it was over a period of 70 years. Then came internet, and that .com space where everything was available, and we had really disruptive companies like Google, and also disruptive business models which we would have never thought of we would have, which completely changed how we live today, which took us to industry 4.0. We're still kind of preparing our organizations really at this point in time to take benefit of 4.0, and that's quite visible in the presentations, where we are seeing we are trying to get the data sorted, getting the data into fair principles, making sure that we can have that open data so that data can be shared, not just within the locations of a country, but across countries as well. But the next shift is definitely in towards industry 5.0, which will truly enable us to really contribute towards sustainable development goals. And what's interesting in this is the span and how far we are moving. Next slide, please. I really want us to kind of just reflect a little bit that to continue from the previous one, of how far we are moving, and it's such a rapid pace. We are in a space where we are seeing that technology is actually causing that exponential change around us. And to really prepare for that change, we need to do something different. We need to set the foundations up so that actually we can respond to all these mega shifts that are happening across within our environment. We are talking about digitization is something that's being talked about right now, where we're looking at getting the data together, automating the processes. But there's so much more that's coming down on us, and we are in a space where we need to set the foundation so we can leverage and kind of take the benefit of advancements of the technology, that's moving at a fast pace. Can I have the next slide, please? So I wanted to, kind of present my perspective on how we need to be responding to these industrial revolutions, and how we need to digitally transform ourselves. I definitely see that we are in a space right now where we are responding to industry 4.0, where we're seeing artificial intelligence, IoT, and other spaces. And what I really see and relevant to the disaster risk reduction and towards disaster management is that we need to aspire to be a smart geodata space where we are collaborating within the data, but also making sure that we've got a computing layer on top of it so that we can make sense out of it. We then would move into industry 5.0 response, which is around how can we really create a human first geodata for disaster and risk reduction. And then I'm going to talk about industry 6.0 response, of what it really means to be creating a homogeneous geo. So let's dive into 4.0 first. Thanks, Pepper. Industry 4.0 is really about generating the value from the information. So moving from operational perspective to analytics, to actually moving into predictive analytics. The big industry technology shifts that we are seeing in industry 4.0, which we currently have got right now, that we need to take advantage of, is Internet of Things, big data analytics, cloud computing, augmented reality, and robotic systems. For the disaster enhancement, for the disaster reduction, we definitely see that it's not difficult. The technology is there in terms of creating a network of geolocations to enable ourselves to get the right situational awareness. Professor Lee did cover around how important it is to really know about the situation awareness using geodata to respond to the disaster. So I think that getting that situation and awareness using the technologies that are available right now, with the computing power that available right now, we are strongly positioned to do that. But to do that, I think probably Rob covered it really well, that we need that policy framework to make sure that's enabled and that data is openly available to be utilized and integrate in that way. But I see definitely movement happening. So I definitely see that it just needs more joint up effort for interoperability of the data, getting that together and getting really the situation awareness around it. Next slide, please. I wanted to jump into 5.0 really, and what does that really mean? What does Industry 5.0 really means, and how is it relevant for this? Industry 5.0 on the continuum is something that will really enable us to respond to the sustainable development goals. Right now, we are living in a digital divide and also a space where we are in a world of inequality, data being not available, and we are kind of, there are too many silos that's available. And I think probably Industry 5.0 is where man and machine will reconcile to work together for the efficiency of natural and built environment, so that we are much more equipped for responding to disasters. It'll be a space where we will have digital twins, which is a digital copy of physical replica of an asset, whether it's natural or built asset, which will enable us to make that real-time decision making, make us more predictable. It needs to be supported by the agile governance and the management and the policy framework that needs to exist, so that we can actually take full potential of AI. Right now, AI is being done at a very very narrow use case level, while probably in Industry 5.0, where man and machine will come together, where we will see more of cogmax, is what I call it, or cognitive machines, which will help us in being proactive to the disaster response rather than reactive. So I think that's where the main shift is really going to happen for us. Next slide, please. And that's where the opportunity is. I think it's. I just wanted to really reflect on this part that we are currently in Industry 4.0, where we are making sure that we've got the data together, make more sense of information. But I think the big shift for us to really achieve the sustainable development goals is really going to happen with our focus on Industry 5.0, where we will have the unconstrained we will have a multiplier effect of value creation, where we'll be much more creative, because a lot of manual stuff will be done by the machines, and machines will help us become more and more intelligent in terms of being more proactive in terms of how we really manage the environment and how we can really make a difference to our to the resources as well. Next slide, please. Industry 6.0. Well, Industry 6.0, nobody knows what's going to come down the pipe. I mean, it is really, looking through the crystal glass, that's how I would predict Industry 6.0. I'm a optimist when it comes to technology. We can't see more than what is going to come for 10 years, but I definitely see that Industry 6.0 would be a big shift where we will live in a dynamic world, which will be fluid, where we can manage the natural resources and built environment like never before. Even, I think that'll be a big shift where we will live in harmony with nature. Technology will be quite natural. It'll be a way of life for us. And we will definitely master the economies of learning. We have got an S-curve learning as human beings, which kind of really goes flat towards as we grow old. But I think probably I believe that in future it is going to be an exponential growth, where our learning will grow exponentially as well, and will enable us to be much more aware and much more in harmony, and will focus on the sustainability for our living. So yes, we can't predict the technology, so that's why I believe, but what we can predict is really the principles that would kick in Industry 6.0, which is a future that we are all looking forward to be in. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rekha. I now would like to invite Uni Krishnan Nair from Commonwealth Secretariat to talk about the built climate resilience and enhanced decision-making through use of satellite remote sensing data. Uni, over to you.
Yeah. Bapan, am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible actually.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Could you please share the presentation? So thank you very much for this opportunity. I think it was great to hear all the expert presentations. So what I'm going to present is a use case of how how an institutional architecture utilizes the Earth observation data, and also how the Commonwealth Secretariat's initiatives lead to better use of Earth observation data, and of course to mainstream those in the governmental system. So this is around the flagship initiative of the Commonwealth Secretariat, the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub. The Access Hub was operationalized in late 2016 as part of the Commonwealth Heads of the Government meeting mandate. So here it works in a hub and spokes model where we have the hub situated in Mauritius and having advisors embedded in long-term basis for the support of the member countries. Next, please. So what distinguishes the Climate Finance Access Hub, and I'll come into the data use part of it. So it's a country demand-driven approach where the long-term experts are embedded for enhanced action, and we also try to balance between human and institutional capacity building for climate finance project structuring. And this is done in partnerships, utilizing interconnected networks, and definitely managed by a governance structure of a steering committee. Next, please. So we are currently present in around 13 countries, and soon expanding and moving forward in the African, Caribbean, and the Pacific region. Will be gradually moving into the Asian region soon with enhanced action, especially with initiatives like the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, International Solar Alliance, etc. Next, please. So what do we support? So we support countries in developing concrete adaptation and mitigation projects. Of course, data is quite significant in this. Climate policy development, evidence-based policy making definitely requires climate data. Climate finance readiness, definitely it's a horizon that is to be shown for countries to prepare. Accreditation support, human and institutional capacity development, knowledge management. This is the kind of broad array of support that we provide to member countries through the Climate Finance Access Hub. Next, please. So next, please. So we partner with UNITAR and the UK Space Agency, and and including partners like the satellite application Catapult, and of course Tonkin and Taylor does play a major role in the capacity building initiatives there. So where we work in delivering capacities around Earth observation based platform that supports member countries in taking different kinds of data to support various aspects around the climate change. Like, for example, we have thematic areas under the Common Sensing Initiative under the climate information. We support in enhancing resilience around food security, disaster risk management, and of course, climate finance. So the role of the Commonwealth in this initiative is to assist countries in accessing climate finance through developing bankable proposals, utilizing the climate data, and developing justifications based on that. Next, please. So how do the major climate funds evaluate the current use of EO data? So major climate funds require strong justifications and evidence rationale for approving project proposals. So this is one of the major bottlenecks where the small states and other vulnerable countries do face a lot of issues in justifying the proposals that are submitting simply because of lack of availability of data. Next, please. So how can EO data improve the bankability of project proposal? That's also an important consideration. Demonstrating the climate rationale in a proposed intervention, calculating baselines and reference conditions, and measuring direction and the rate of change for key project variables can all be supported by EO data. But it's not only the availability of the data or access to data, but it's also analysis and interpretation and utilization of the data, which is equally important. So actually that determines the scale of the project for impact. So for example, if it is an adaptation project, what is the kind of scale of intervention that is required to make substantial transformational impact? Risk and vulnerability. How do you highlight the risk? How do you identify, quantify the risk, and also to pinpoint as to where you need to act and where lies the intervention and why not the other option. So definitely this is basically an important region where the Climate Finance Access Hub operates, which is between the availability of the data or the data providers and the policymakers who utilize the data. So common sensing is an initiative that the Commonwealth Secretariat is supporting the government of Fiji, Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu in supporting and building climate resilience and enhanced decision making. So these are the partners with whom we work with UNITAR, with University of Portsmouth, Met Office, DevEx, Sensonomics, etc. Next, please. So we do come of late. We came up with a discussion paper on Earth observation technologies for improved access to climate finance that details the various elements of how the data and what is the role of data and information in terms of access to climate finance, and where lies the gap, and what are the kind of potential opportunities available. And then the paper is currently available in the Commonwealth website for a public reading. So I'll urge to just go through, so that that gives the kind of next level of information. Next, please. So it's not only about utilizing the data, it's also about institutionalizing the data. So with the government of Fiji, the Commonwealth Secretariat is working in terms of developing what we call the project development unit within the Ministry of Economy in Fiji. So basically to act as a coordinating unit to utilize the data, because yes, there are platforms available, but if the platforms are not integrated within the governmental system, it basically will not be sustained for long term. So this is basically to ensure that the projects deliver to the scale and to the requirements of the country. So the initial feedback has been extremely encouraging, and these ministries are very keen for this kind of an institutionalization process to move on. Next, please. So this is the common sensing platform. In a nutshell, basically it has generic mapping applications, climate data applications, DLR applications. We have the multi-criteria decision analysis tools, and of course for agriculture vulnerability, including sugar industry. So basically sugarcane was one industry which was analyzed in detail for Fiji. And of course data catalogs. Next, please. Yeah, so this is briefly what I wanted to present, but what I wanted to urge here is basically it's not only the availability of the data and also the kind of different layers of data that are needed, but in terms of analysis of the data and utilizing the data for the end use, that's also an important area, and we find there are a lot of gaps there in member countries, and definitely that's an area we would like to work together with the groups, including Geo. So thank you very much, and back to you, Bappa.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Uni, for your nice case study as well as the presentation. And you actually just demonstrated that how the data is actually utilizing to accessing the climate financing, some of these, developing countries, and who are actually quite heavily struggling with the data accessing or applying the FAIR principle in their country. And I can see many of the question has been raised, but also many of this question actually already answered by our panelists. So thank you so much from the moderation point of view to responding to those questions. And we will have also only 2 minutes left over. If anyone has any question, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, I would just like to say it's just a great presentation by all our panelists. And one thing that we understood, like how our technology as well as the platform and are quite advancing. As Reka just mentioned, actually, we are at 4.0, but actually technology is already going to 6.0. And whereas actually, when we are actually trying to apply our data in this 4.0 platforms, still we are having a lot of struggling uniformity, and as well as making sure that a fair principle in place. So how we gonna look ourselves using those advanced platform, advanced technology, advanced knowledge to bring us to that kind of level, and how we can actually ensure that using this data as well as technology, we can able to ensure a safer world and safe community, and also a future and foreseeable future using the data to predict the future risk as well as future vulnerabilities. With these things, I just like to thank again to Reka Kabanda, Dr. Harren, Uni, Krishnan Nair, Rob Deacon, as well as Professor Lee for joining us from various parts of the world in this particular session, and also in the Geo 2021 virtual symposium. It's just a new normal for us to everything going on online. So, but we love to actually see you face to face in coming year or in the future, or maybe there will be some new technology in the 6.0 where you can actually transform yourselves to other part of the world. So thanks again for everyone for joining us, but we look forward to have again, and please feel free also if you have any questions or any burning questions by email to the organizer. We'll be able to actually answer you over email, or as well as personally flick any email to our speakers if you need to know more about the technology as well as the case study or any of the project that has been shared today. Thanks again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Papa.
Thanks.